I'm Tash.
And I'm Damo.
And together we are so excited to bring you this week's episode of the Bari Chronicles.
So Justine and I both head up Nutrition for Weight Loss Surgery. We've got a fabulous team who work with us as well. So the business started really as an individual consulting business with a surgeon here in Adelaide, and we still work with surgeons closely, and we see patients one-on-one, on our team see patients one-on-one in the rooms. But over time, what we realised is there's lots of patients that we can't see one-on-one, but we would still like to be able to get our tools and our knowledge and our resources and all sorts of things to them. So we started to develop in different ways, and that included dipping our toe in the social media world and running a Facebook page and then an Instagram page. And we started to put together books, and we started to sell our books across Australia. So people started to know us, and then we started to put together online programs, and it's just been an ongoing evolution for us and our team of different ways that we can support people. And that's how we've evolved, isn't it, Justine?
Yeah, 100%. And I think finding the best way to provide our resources and information to as many people as possible has been an absolute goal for us, because that's what we love to do, what we enjoy doing. I think the mini books are consumable for people, and it's a point I really, need to know a little bit more about protein. So let's get into that specific book. Or I'm really lost at the supermarket. Let's grab the shopping companion. So I think, making the information consumable. I always visualize when somebody starts out on their weight loss surgery journey, it's like being given a jigsaw puzzle and all the pieces scattered everywhere. And where do you start to put it all together? And it can feel incredibly overwhelming. So I think it's really, really important that we piece things together to help people know how to put that jigsaw together in a way that works for them.
Yeah. I've had people say to me, why do I need to see a dietitian if I'm having weight loss surgery? I just want to be able to have the surgery and then eat whatever I want, and
Surely I'll still lose weight. Won't that be fine?
Yeah, I think one of the tricky things as well about dietitians and their image generally, people who've struggled with their weight for a long period of time sometimes come to us and they have a little bit of a mistrust with dietitians because they've seen a dietitian has delivered something along the lines of a food pyramid or a eat this food chart type scenario, and that doesn't work for everyone. We know that generally most people who attempt to lose weight don't lose that weight long term without an intervention like surgery. So they've developed a little bit of mistrust. So we're often coming in from a place where we're behind the eight ball. People already have a bit of awareness about us. And I think we've been positioned in a tricky way that often dietitians are put up front in a surgical environment where people see us as a tick box that they need to get past to get surgery. And that's actually a really, really minor part of our role. We're not actually a tick box. That pre-surgery time is about meeting someone, finding out where they're at and building rapport with them so that we can actually help them when the challenges start, which we know is after that period where the honeymoon is over and the surgery isn't doing the work anymore. And I think it's a bit tricky when you've been positioned as a tick box that you need to just jump through, or a hoop to jump through, or a tick box you need to get. Do you see it that way as well, Justine?
I think as dietitians, many people haven't necessarily had the best experience in the past. They may view us a little bit as the food police, or feel a little bit intimidated or judged that they're just going to be blamed for their weight. And that's something we work really, really hard the first time we meet somebody to let them know, hey, this is actually a metabolic disease process. You can have two people eating exactly the same food. One's going to be absolutely fine, never have a weight issue. Another person has a significant weight issue. So this isn't an even playing field, and it's not fair. And I think weight loss without intervention is essentially fighting your own biology, and your biology is going to win. So we have very powerful counter-regulation to drive our weight back up when we lose weight. And so we're different. We're not teaching people stuff they already know. We know when we meet somebody, we're not the first time they've tried to tackle their weight. We know that our clients and patients often have amazing food knowledge. They'll know calories better than me because they've had to calorie count through their life. So we're looking at different things. We're not just saying, okay, you need to change the type of milk you're using, or let's just eat smaller portions.
Or trim the fat off your steak. It's not about
deeper than that. And we're actually teaching people not just what foods to eat, but the fundamentals that are really going to assist them to work hardest with their surgery and avoid the loopholes that so many of our clients accidentally fall into because they don't have the right knowledge when they set out. So really clear example, if people don't know to not eat for too long, they can slip into grazing habits and be eating portions very similar to what they did before their surgery, because they're stretching that out. Now, that's a really common cause of regain. Or the essentialness of keeping the food and fluid apart, for example. It's not just knowing the rule, but understanding the why behind the rule, because it's very powerful to maintain that change and therefore maintain good long-term results.
That is actually such a common question on Bariatric Support Australia, is why can't I eat and drink together?
Sure.
Yeah.
That right there, it just, to me, what that says is that you understand those fundamental questions that we us weight loss surgery people ask.
Yeah. Look, I think we were doing one of our small group calls only earlier this week, and one of our members, she's 5 years post-op, and she said, oh my gosh, the pennies just dropped. I did not realize that the eating and drinking could contribute to regain. So I knew I wasn't meant to do it, but she felt that was because of a comfort. So, you know, I might get refluxy or bloated or not fit my food. Hey, that's not happening for me. So maybe I can drink and eat. And so she was just drinking and eating, not realizing that that was speeding up her gastric emptying. So food was moving, and I can't remember if she had a sleeve or bypass. So food was moving through that sleeve or pouch much faster. So she was getting hungry much sooner than she otherwise would have, so needing to snack more. So it's when I work with somebody early on in their surgery, I say, please just remember this is a long-term foundation that we want you to stick with. Even if it feels okay, it's still really important to keep that food and fluid separate.
Yeah.
Interestingly, sorry.
No, I still do that 5 years later. I still don't eat and drink together.
Yeah, and it was interesting on the call that Justine was speaking about, we had someone who was 3 weeks post-surgery and someone who was 5 years post-surgery, and people in between. And the thing is, what we were saying to the person 3 weeks post-surgery was actually resonating with the person 5 years post-surgery, because she was saying, what do I need to be aware of moving on to solids? And we were talking about things not choose your low-fat milk or your light cheese. It was, you need to start setting up that habit of when you're on solid food, separating the food and fluid and not stretching out those meals for too long. So we were coming from these are the habits that you'll need to really start implementing now, because they will still serve you 5 years down the track. And then we said to the person, does this resonate with you? She said, oh my God, absolutely. It's 100%. Really interesting to see that, and it's about getting those behaviors and patterns and habits in place early for the long term. It's not about always choosing low-fat milk.
No, I totally agree. I totally agree. Even when it comes to the the time frame around eating, it's something that I still practice. I don't eat for more than 20 minutes. And I've just always maintained that particular thing. That there were 2 things that my dietitian was very, very strong on, was don't mix your fluids and your food together, and eat for 20 minutes or no longer than that.
Yeah.
And I've maintained that, and also maintained the weight loss now for 4 years.
And that shows how powerful those habits are.
Yeah, those fundamentals,
powerful.
getting them in place from the start. But one of the challenges is the surgery is often really powerful in the early stage. So irrespective of the lifestyle changes, we tend to get weight loss. So sometimes some of those formations of habit don't happen because you're not getting the feedback that without it, it's not working. Does that make sense? So you're kind of getting away with not following the rules. You go, well, the dietitian told me all these things, but I'm not doing it and I'm still losing weight. So it mustn't be that important. But then it's 12, 18 months later and the honeymoon's over and the regain starts and you're left scratching your head going, well, what am I doing wrong? It's then we have to come back and remind of those foundations. So if we can get them right from the start and just very embedded as habit, it makes such a difference in that long-term journey, I think, as you're demonstrating.
So that's really that's great, because so often we have people, they'll say to us, oh, I've got to wait 12 months before I can have surgery for my private health to kick in. What are some things that I can implement now? So, the whole, separating your food and your drinks, there's those foundational things that people could be doing for 12 months to build that habit and the consistency of the things that are going to be beneficial for us down the track.
Absolutely. I think another thing that I find when I meet somebody for the first time, there's often lots of missed meals happening. So perhaps early restrictions through the day, that may just be because there's not a big appetite early in the day, or actually actively trying to restrict to control the weight, and then calorie loading at the end of the day. So getting very over hungry by kind of that after work time or after dinner time. And so what I really like somebody to be working on, if they've got a 12-month wait for their surgery, regular meals. So trying to eat at least 3 meals a day. You think with that tiny little tummy, if we're relying on just 1 or 2 eating occasions a day, there's no way you can hit your protein targets. No way you can hit your fiber or your nutrition targets. So just that pattern of eating, getting in a habit of eating 3 meals and then including the snacks if you're physically hungry in between meals is just a really basic, and sometimes we underestimate how important that is, something that you can be doing from the very moment you decide, hey, I'm working towards surgery.
I think that's one of the biggest things, is that routine, because like you said, you see it so often. And another thing that can go alongside of that is something that we know can become a challenge down the track, is not having those regular meals, but often relying on the high calorie fluids, which get you through the day. So whether it's the, grabbing the big coffee on the way to work and then sipping on it during the day, or grabbing a smoothie for lunch and sipping on it through the afternoon, and making sure that there are those defined eating times and that your energy levels aren't being pepped up with high calorie fluids through the day as well, because that's something that weight loss surgery can't beat. It can't beat sipping on high calorie fluids all day. So it's really, like Justine said, making sure those fundamental behaviours are there so that when the surgery time arrives, you're ready to go and you're ready to really just settle into that long-term new lifestyle that'll get you the health benefits that you're looking for.
Yeah, because it's amazing how many calories can be in a latte. I didn't realize, and like early on, I would do that. I'd have a decent cup of coffee, and that would be my breakfast, and that'd sort of carry me through. And I didn't realize I was having nearly 800 calories a day in coffee.
Yeah, it is amazing. And I remember one day a client was really struggling, and she was saying, I mean, really, all I'm doing is just having a cup of coffee here and there. And when you drill down, and that was 6 cups of coffee, and that was 6 medium lattes, and there may have been not much sugar, but just a little bit in each. And it's not the fact that it was half a teaspoon of sugar. It's the fact that it was a chunk of milk and sugar and sipping across the day, which was sort of getting around that restriction, because it was like the milk was the grazing. So like we said about grazing patterns can be tricky. So
Very
there's absolutely, we love a coffee and there's no problem with coffee, but with all foods and all drinks, it's how you use them. It's like a hammer, unless you, that's right. It's like a hammer. Unless you know how to use it, it can do bad things and it can do good things. And it's the same with food.
And yeah, we're totally not anti a latte after weight loss surgery, but I really educate, think of it as a snack. So that could be a morning snack. If we're going to have it, and like lots of my clients are not very hungry at breakfast time. So I'll say have a milky coffee. If we're struggling with hitting protein targets, we might put some protein powder in there, but then that's not going to keep you as full as if you'd had solid food, which is going to stay in that sleeve or pouch a lot longer than that liquid calorie. So then you're probably going to need something around 10, 11 o'clock if that hunger strikes. And we might reverse and have more breakfast food at that morning snack time rather than grab the bicky at that time. So, you know, a lot of people will take, say, a little bit of muesli or granola and yogurt and have that as a morning snack. So we're just reversing the morning coffee and breakfast with each other, and that tends to work quite well. Not everybody feels like breakfast at 7 a.m. and I think it's working with what your body wants and what works for you. There's no, you know, cookie cutter. Everybody after weight loss surgery needs to eat this way, because if we try and implement that, 99% of people aren't going to do well, because it has to work with your likes and preferences and what happens in your day. But yeah, we're not anti-coffee, but it's having that limit on it, and a limit on how many meals or snacks we're having that are liquid, because they just don't stay in the sleeve or pouch as long as solid food would.
So a question from from Bariatric Support Australia. One of our members has asked, why can I only consume 300 calories a day, and if I consume more, I put on kilos weekly? I'm talking 5 kilos in a week. That sort of a question to me is really a important dietitian one, because like I know what works for me, but I don't know what, you know, other people are going through. And what would you say for someone in that position?
That's a really tricky one, because we would never recommend that someone try and live on 300 calories a day. Your body, and that is something that we would highly discourage, because we know that once people get too far below 800 calories a day, it's not enough to run a body effectively. It's like an empty fuel tank running a car, and your body then goes into this mode where if you start putting anything extra in, it wants to store it and it wants to hold it, because it knows tomorrow you're going to be starving again. And so we really educate people to be meeting at least that 800 calories a day. Understand in the first couple of weeks after surgery that might be a challenge for some people, but over time, and certainly over those first couple of months, we really want to be getting to that point where we're getting enough to nourish your body, because 300 calories a day is not. And I guess with someone like that, it's about having the trust that slowly building on those calories to a level where your body is happy, and that may initially mean there's some gain, but a lot of that initially may also be fluid gain, because you take in more food, you hold more fluid. And so I'd expect that person is really having some challenges with their fluid balance at the moment as well.
I was thinking exactly the same. To go up from 300, there's going to be that fluid come on board. So I imagine they're probably quite ketotic, unless all they're eating in that 300 is carbohydrate. If they're trying to hit their protein targets and being really restrictive, I imagine they're in ketosis. As soon as we come out of ketosis, we do have a little bit of a fluid gain happening, and that would be, understandably so frightening for that person. And so they'd just revert back to, I need to restrict, what am I going to do? But it's really having trust over at least a month to try and grade up slowly, because how miserable to try and live on 300 calories. That's just, not, that's less than one meal. So, you know,
the joy is gone from life at that point.
the joy. And, you know, part of our absolute ethos is this, you know, our work with people is not just about weight loss. It's about building a healthy relationship with food where we're not having to actively restrict and diet, and food's not taboo and scary. So finding that balance where we're achieving our weight and health goals, but we're also really positive about the food we're eating. So that particular question, they may need to work alongside a quite experienced dietitian to give them some support and really work with them as they titrate back up with their calories. But it's really difficult, because if I was working with that person one-on-one, I would not say, well, you need to stick with that 300 because otherwise you're gaining weight. I would look at a lot of other, you know, medical and individual aspects of that situation to work out what's going on. So I would encourage that person to get some one-on-one support.
So when you say a dietitian with that experience, you know, the dietitian obviously needs a bit more experience with a specific issue like that, especially after weight loss surgery. How do people go about finding that sort of dietitian? You know, is it all right for me to ring up and say, hey, do your dietitians know anything about weight loss surgery? Where would we start?
It's tricky. It can be tricky. I would always be looking for a dietitian that has worked with surgeons for a number of years. And the way that you can often find that is we have a society, we call it ANZMOS, the Australia New Zealand Obesity Surgery Society, ANZMOSS, I think.
Yes, and metabolic and obesity.
Metabolic and obesity surgery study. And if you Google that, they have, so we're members of that society, and a lot of the dietitians who work with weight loss surgeons are also members of society. And it means that we go to regular training events with ANZMOS, and we're always trying to keep up to date with those education events that happen. And on there, you can do a find a surgeon, a find a dietitian, a find a psychologist search. So there's a number of different searches you can do. But generally, people who are registered with that group do have a genuine interest. They're not just going, oh, I'm happy to see that person because I've got an opening next week, which, and I appreciate everyone's, you know, trying to keep their business afloat and keep it running, but you do need someone with that extra interest, and that's often a good place to find those people.
Well, that's very, very helpful.
Yeah, I love that. So something that does come up quite often is, what do I need to do pre-op?
It's a great question.
Can you guys sort of shed
nobody wants to do pre-op, and we would never want to make somebody do pre-op unless it was really important. So I think that's what we start with. We're not just doing it to test you out and see how you're going to go with it. And you know, it's a really, I think it's one of the toughest phases, because you don't have the support of surgery. It literally is using willpower to stick with those products. But Sal, do you want to take this one away?
Yeah, and look, I'm not going to pretend that there hasn't been a little bit of contention in some of the surgeon circles lately about whether pre-op is necessary or not. But the original research that's all based on was some research out of Melbourne. A dietitian, Susie Collis, who did some research with Paul O'Brien back in the very early lap band days. So this is going back a while when this, I know. the lap band sending shivers down your spine, I can see. There was research, and her research focused on the liver shrinkage, and they actually measured liver shrinkage when they put people on various periods of a very low calorie diet, and they did use OptiFast. I think the key is to show that it wasn't deliberately trying to be as mean as possible. They tested how much the liver would shrink over a much longer period and found that the greatest shrinkage of the liver and the stores of fat all around the stomach, so it wasn't only the liver, it was all those abdominal fat storage. The greatest shrinkage happened in 2 weeks, and they actually did test it for longer, but the outcome was really we're going to get the most benefit in 2 weeks. So we think that's a good recommendation to make it a smoother path for the surgeon. It firms up the liver. It means there's less fatty tissue to get through. And I guess that was probably before keyhole was a massive thing, because some people were still doing open surgeries. There were still some open surgeries around for bypasses, and retracting the liver out of the way was a bit of a challenge sometimes when it was storing quite a bit of fat and it was floppy. But it was just found that a harder, firmer liver was easier to move aside to access the stomach after 2 weeks on a VLCD. And I think it's good that she found that, and not that I think it was 4 or 6 weeks was necessary. So it really was, that was the recommendation that came out initially. And it's been, I guess, tested in different forms since. But there are some surgeons now who are not doing it. I know we had a surgeon last year who spoke to us at the ANSMOS conference from the Netherlands, and he runs his own he actually runs his own hospital. And he's not a massive advocate of doing it. He says it doesn't impact his work. So there's likely to be a lot more emerging in this space, I would say.
But I think at this point, it is so important to follow your surgeon's recommendation.
That's right.
If they feel like they need that extra space and they find that surgery is easier and safer, that is what we have to follow.
That's
so
right.
we want that surgery to be as seamless as possible. And I think that 2 weeks, the beautiful thing about the VLCD products like OptiFast is they're nutritionally balanced. So we're getting all the vitamins and minerals we need. We're getting into a good
with a great big like side of regret and remorse, but anyway, yes.
I know that's so tough, but I think it's been as creative with them as possible, and mixing up and using the bars and freezing the shakes and doing things. We in our clinic, we allow some protein to come in with that, so there's always a meal in the evening of some vegetables and some protein, so that chew factor's happening. Again, working with an experienced dietitian that can formulate the plan that makes that phase as easy for you as possible. So we want people not to be miserable for that 2 weeks. So we do try and make it as gentle as we can. But we know that 2 weeks, if surgeon wants that to be done, it's really important that you are quite strict with it, knowing that it's for, that really important benefit of that liver reduction.
I was 100% strict. I didn't cheat at all, not at all. I had explosive diarrhea on a daily basis.
Oh my goodness!
I spent my last 2 days. I just fasted because on the third last day, every time I took a sip, I vomited again.
It went straight through,
and I just.
So in that case, we would do a food-based plan. If there's a massive tolerance issue, we wouldn't put somebody through that, leading them into surgery with vomiting or diarrhea prior. So we would work with that person to come up with perhaps a food-based ketogenic diet, or looking at different products, or looking if it's the lactose in products, adding some lactose.
I think that's what it was for me. But I didn't. Back then, I wasn't even game to ask the dietitian for any alternatives, because I didn't want to be seen to just be complaining or, I don't know. I was frightened of what they might think of me.
And doesn't that come back to that whole food police or that intimidation of the dietitian? That
it does.
I think the biggest thing you need to be thinking about when working with your dietitian is that they're your partner in this. They're working alongside you to make your journey as easy and effective as possible. So it's not, us on one side and the patient or client on the other, and we're dictatorial, and it's about being collaborative. And going, okay, that's not working for you. That's not a good strategy. Let's try plan B. And if plan B doesn't work, let's look at plan C. So, that would be a message I absolutely would love to get out to anybody listening. If you're feeling like your dietitian is not your partner in this, then it might be worth exploring, a different practitioner.
I love that.
Oh, look, I absolutely love that. And I wish, going back, that I had I felt that I could bring that up. And it was probably very much a me thing, and where my self-esteem was at, I think, at the time as well. But pre-op was, for me, it was just horrendous. I did have a lap band many years ago, so I had already had an experience with OptiFast, and I knew kind of what I was in for. And I did. I had diarrhea for that whole 2-week period. I lost nearly 12 kilos, but
not in a good way, though.
No,
not in a good way. You would have been incredibly dehydrated, you poor thing.
I was, and very sore as well.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is, though, that probably when you had your surgery, things have progressed so much that you might not have felt there were options available to you. You know, there are lots of dietitians specializing in weight loss surgery, and because the numbers of weight loss surgery are increasing over time, there's more dietitians becoming skilled, and there are more options available to you, and there are more people on social media that you can follow and think, oh, maybe they're sort of the person that I might gel with. And in the early days, there weren't many options. There was the person in your surgeon's clinic, and that was it. And so it's good that there's now different options. And sometimes people will come to us from other surgeons and say, oh, I didn't like their dietitian. And we know there are people from us that would go to their dietitian and say, I didn't like those dietitians. So everyone has to find their person that they are comfortable with.
It's about relationships, and I think you've got to have a really strong relationship with whoever you're working with and feel really comfortable and feel that it's very open. And I think, Sally, as you said, the emerging number of people on Instagram and Facebook that are really putting themselves out to offer support, you get to have a bit of a sneak peek at their personality and their message and kind of their attitude and go, yeah, that feels right for me. So I think it's a really great time, because there is, I think, outside of the clinic environment, there's actually lots of options of support available.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the emphasis that you both made on the relationship and on it being a collaborative journey together. Yes. That's what I'm taking away from what you're saying, is that's the sort of relationship that we would hope to have with our dietitian, so that it is an ongoing relationship, not just that, hi, I'm going to have surgery, please tick my box. Exactly.
Yeah, and that's not the point at all. And I think that's what we really like to get across, is that the ticking the box for us is not the enjoyable part of the job. It's actually building a relationship with someone to then be able to help them.
That journey.
And I think it's been available to people at times that they need you. So, you know, we've got different support options available, and some of those members are able to be part of our private Facebook community. So when they've got a question, they can ask us at a time that feels comfortable for them or is important to them, and we're there to interact with them at that time, because it's, you know, if you've got these pre-scheduled appointments, it's not always the time that you're in need or you need some support. So it's actually trying to create support options that are really fluid and flexible, and they're for people to dip in and out of when they need that support. So I think it's really important to find something that works for you.
Yeah, definitely. Yes. So another question that we get asked a lot is about nutrition panels and what we should look for on a nutrition panel. Tash and I, we've been banging this drum for a couple of years now that, you know, we need to check the nutrition panels, because, you know.
But can you demystify the mystical thing that is the nutrition panel, and what should we be looking for on them?
Just looking in my office, if I have a copy, we've actually got a whole book on that,
I
because
do.
Oh,
Hold
you
that
do.
thought.
Because this was something I used to have, and when I first started practicing in private practice, behind me on my desk, I would have product after product after product there that I could pull forward and show people the panel. And then people would come into their consultations with me with a shopping bag full of empty packages for me to look at with them. And they wanted that reassurance. Is this a good product? Is that a good product? So we actually developed the shopping companion, which looks at everything from yogurts to wraps to tinned fish to pre-prepared frozen meals. It gives a guide for what to look for on the label for that specific product category. Because when we're choosing bread, we're looking for very different numbers than if we're choosing a yogurt, for example. So we don't have that universal guide. And then what we've done, because it's really, it's hugely time consuming to be at the supermarket having to look at every label. So we've actually done a list of top picks for every category, which a lot of my clients will actually do their shopping online with the shopping companion next to them. They go, right, I need yogurt, look up that page, pick a yogurt from the top pick list without having to read that label. So that hard work's actually done for them. And that's been really useful for people. So it's very hard to demystify in one sentence because different products we've got different criteria. But I think the biggest thing is with the criteria, I say please be flexible. It's not a hard fast rule. It's if your yogurt has 2 grams less protein than what we suggest or a gram more sugar, it doesn't mean you have to leave it on the shelf. So it's more using it as a bit of a guideline to know, hey, is this in the ballpark of something that's going to fit my goals for myself?
And if you don't know how to read a panel and you haven't seen, for example, we post often our criteria on social media, or we'll share snippets from the book, so you can always check us out. But I think if you don't know what numbers to look for, the next best thing is to look at the ingredients list and tell if it's actually made from real food. Because sometimes what you will find is you'll look at an ingredients list and there's an awful lot of things that don't sound like real food and that have a lot of numbers and also fancy names for sugar or fat or salt or all sorts of things. If the ingredients aren't recognizable to the food, then sometimes it's a clue that it's something that you don't want to be having in huge amounts, I think. And that's sometimes a good thing. But it is so tricky, because I know when we came out of uni as dietitians, we don't really want to admit that it was 20-something years ago, but when we did, because we only looked 27, so when we did come out as dietitians, you were taught the very simple, Justine, was it 10 grams of fat, 10 grams of sugar, 400 milligrams of salt? Like there was a basic label reading criteria that you were taught. But we know that doesn't apply, Justine said, that doesn't apply to every food group. So that's why we've gone through and looked at all the different food groups and what's relevant in those, because you are looking for different features of each food.
And I think, thinking about how much food of that food you're going to be eating. So some people will say to me, okay, I'm looking at sweet chili sauce and look at how much sugar there is per 100 grams. And I say, but you're not having 100 grams of that. You're only having 5 or 10 grams. So that impact is actually really minor. Whereas if it's something you're eating a full cup of, we're going to be more, focused on what those numbers are. So it's not,
For example, have you guys seen the new Wicked Cracked, the chocolate sauce?
No, I haven't. Have you, Sally?
So it is a low or no sugar option, like Ice Magic. Okay, so it's a new product, and we've seen it popping up on BSA constantly, and people are asking about it. So yeah, it's just and I had a look at it the other day and I thought, I don't know. So I would be interested to know what you think of that. Maybe you can look at it after this and just get back.
And maybe we can pop a story on our Instagram, Justine.
Pardon?
Yeah.
We could have a look and pop a story on our Instagram chatting about
Great idea.
Just comparing, the two, whether it really is a good option. or whether people should just have, you know, the ice magic if they were going to choose to do that discretionary type of a thing.
There is a chocolate sauce that is sweetened with stevia. Now, I'm not going to remember the name of it yet, but a lot of people use that like with a bit of milk to make a chocolate milk, or so that can be really useful. But I think you're absolutely right that sometimes when we're craving something, we try and eat something that's healthier in that category. So you know, we're feeling like chocolate, so we try and have 5 different things to hit that sweet craving, and we still haven't got there, and we end up eating the chocolate anyway.
What we've done is we've eaten all of that,
yes,
and then we end up eating that.
So you're better just to eat the chocolate in the first place. Decide that you really fancy it. Portion how much you're comfortable to eat before you start eating. And I often, with something like chocolate, I'll put that as part of a snack plate. So often we feel like snacking after dinner, and that's when people tend to unravel a little bit and they're back and forth to the fridge and pantry, and I feel like something sweet, now I feel like something savory, and it's a pattern I see a lot. So for that situation, I'll suggest a little snack plate.
I love that.
With something that's kind of fresh and sweet. So maybe some strawberries, something that is indulgent, like a couple of squares of chocky, something kind of sharp and punchy. So that might be some tasty cheese, some gherkins, a few little nuts, so crunchy and salty, or some crackers. So you've got this, and I'm talking just a little bit of each to build this little snack plate that has different textures and flavors. So it's not just all about the chocolate, and that tends to be really satisfying. And then I'll say to my clients, now go brush your teeth, and that's eating done. And
I love that. Well. I love that. That is it. It's such an empowering and moderate and sensible approach, rather than saying, you know, substitute all of those things for all of these other things. See, something that I've done the entire time throughout my weight loss surgery journey is I keep and Damo knows this, I keep a block of chocolate in the drawer beside my bed. Now, I don't always have it, obviously, but if I want to have a square, then I do at night. And then I do that. I go and brush my teeth, and then that's that.
And it's not taboo then. It's not this big deal. You're an adult. If you want to eat chocolate, that's totally your right. But it's actually that you feel good about it. You feel in control of it. It's positive for you. And therefore, it's building that healthy relationship with food where, you know, no food is absolutely taboo.
No. Yeah. And I think the key thing you said there was, if I want a piece of it, I do. But it wasn't that if I feel like going to demolish the block, I will. There's a difference with knowing that knowing you can have it, because as Justine said, you are an adult, and going, and I probably need that much to fix this craving. And that's all. And it'll be there tomorrow. I don't need to eat. And the more you sometimes say, no, I can't eat it, I can't eat it, I can't eat it, is the more likely that when you do get it out, you might eat more than you wanted to. And you know, eat several rows instead of a couple of squares and those sorts of things.
That's a huge consequence of dieting, that those foods feel very forbidden or scarce, or I'll eat that now, but I'm not going to eat it again. This is the very last time. Whereas if you know it's always there, always available, there's an abundance of food, we can hit that pause before we have that indulgence and say, yes, I can have it, but do I actually want it in this moment? And that's really powerful for people.
Yeah, that's great, because I always struggled with moderation. You know, people say to me, oh, you can have it in moderation. Well, what's moderation? For me, moderation was finishing the block of chocolate. Or, you know, it was at the bottom of the bag of chips, and I had to eat my way down to moderation. You know, and I always struggle with it, because it's like, well, for me, there were certain food groups or certain foods after surgery I just had to cut out, because if I had one bite of it, I knew I wouldn't be able to stop. I didn't have that ability to control it. You know, it's a lot better now, but early on it was a real struggle.
What
So
would you say
yeah,
about
there's a couple of strategies I would use in that situation, because not everybody is able to moderate, and there can be that sense of loss of control over that eating, and that's certainly something we want to work on. But I would either be encouraging that if we are going to indulge, it's out of the house. So you might, if you went out for dinner, choose to have, an indulgence at that time, or it might be when you're at the mall, you might have your little treat there where there's that external limit on how much is eaten. So we're purchasing away from home. Another one that can work really well for people is to just buy small portions. So not have the family bag of chips or the large block of chocolate, but rather have the smaller bag or the single portion of chocolate. And so there's actually that environmental or external control of that portion. You're not having to use that self-moderation if that's something you really struggle with.
I did a training years ago with a man named Dr. George Blair West, I think his name was, and he had a book called Weight Loss for Food Lovers. And one of his approaches was, if you know you're going to, like, for example, you said, Damien, where you demolish the whole block or the whole packet. His approach was more in line with Justine's about those smaller portions, but his approach was actually allowing yourself that amount daily. So if you knew that every day you were going to eat, you wanted to eat the whole block of chocolate, he would suggest that you get the multi-packs, like the little
Yes.
dairy milk,
Yep.
2 square blocks. And you would say, okay, as part of my eating plan, I'm going to have one of those each day, and I'm going to eat it when I know I'm most going to enjoy it. So I'm not going to hide it in the car and stuff it in on the way to work because I need to get it eaten before.
Yeah.
It would be, do you know what? I really enjoy that mid-afternoon as a bit of a pick-me-up. I'm going to enjoy it then. And it was all about portioning, but knowing that it was coming. And if you got to that point and went, I don't actually feel like this today, but you know what? It'll be there tomorrow. Then that is also okay. But it wasn't, if I eat this now, then I'm not going to eat chocolate again for 2 weeks or I'll never lose weight. It was getting away from that mindset and about that very small, regular exposure to make it less taboo. I think that was his approach. And that always resonated with me quite well. I found it a really useful training. You always learn new things.
It's such a, because I definitely had food addictions. And it was such a massive shock. After my weight loss surgery, I grieved food.
Yeah.
I was so incredibly sad that I couldn't eat to the same level that I used to eat. I know that I could still eat. I understood that, but not to that same degree that I once ate. And then just missing certain foods for quite a while. So for me, and I know that this is actually something that we're seeing an increase in as well on Bariatric Support Australia. I suffer with reactive hypoglycemia. The medicated kind.
Yes.
So for me, anything more than 12 grams of carbs, and I will literally be on the floor. My blood sugar just drops.
Yeah.
I've actually had a smashed tooth just from passing out and all those sorts of things. So for me, my love of carbs came to a screeching halt because I just couldn't consume them. What tips and strategies do you have for people that are getting that type of thing, the reactive hypoglycemia?
That is such a tricky one. That's been quite topical at our recent conferences, and there's been an endocrinologist who's come along to speak about it because he's often prescribing the medication for people like yourself who are experiencing reactive hypos and needing that medication to stabilize things a little bit. And I remember last year he spoke, and it was for a significant period of time. He might have spoke for about 45 minutes. And then in his summary slide, he said, essentially what we need to do is we need to eat smaller amounts of carbs, but they need to be the right type of carbs, and they need to be more often. So less of them, the right type, and more often. So for you, you know that 12 grams is your limit, but it's about having a small amount of carbohydrate for you, probably with every meal and snack, a very small amount, to regulate your glucose levels throughout the day and avoid getting over that hump each time, because you know you're going to fall in a heap, and trying for those slowly digested or low GI carbs wherever you possibly can, because that is going to mean that there's a more sustained release of glucose into your blood and not as likely to cause a plummet afterwards.
And when you have celiac as well.
Oh, no.
But combining with the protein and the fiber and some healthy fats. So to slow
the digestion.
Yeah.
And not drinking with that to mean it's moving through into the intestine more quickly. So again, it comes back to those foundations, not drinking with the carb food, because that'll slip it through nice and quickly. And we have a concept that we call smart food combinations that we talk about, and it's as part of our online trainings, isn't it, Justine, where we talk about combining low GI carbs with protein, with fat, because the combination of the protein and some healthy fat actually and fiber altogether slows the emptying of food from your stomach. And we're looking at slowing everything down so you're not getting peaks and troughs in the glucose.
And that helps with satiety too. So even somebody not having reactive hypoglycemia, that same smart food combination stands. So it's about that one meal keeping you satisfied as soon as possible for as long as possible, because then we've got far more control over our eating. One of our biggest triggers for overeating or poor food choices is getting over hungry. So extended periods of time between eating, or not having those good combinations of food, or eating and drinking too close together.
And you can test those things out for yourself. And obviously this is a process you would have been through, because you know that level that suits you. But we find that people can test different aspects of putting together smart food combinations to see how they work for them. For example, if I had a piece of white toast for my breakfast with Vegemite, which is essentially just white toast and Vegemite, nothing exciting there, I know I'll be hungry very, very soon after that. Whereas if I have a heavily grained piece of toast that's actually quite high in fat because it's got seeds in it, and I put a bit of peanut paste or something on there, and you know, to give it that little bit of extra, little bit of protein, little bit of fat, and then I know that is going to last me much longer because I've got a higher protein, higher fat, lower GI piece of toast than a white Vegemite toast. So it's about experimenting with those things. And someone might say to a dietitian, I just have a piece of toast, but to us, that can mean so many different things.
Yeah.
It's about tuning in on what that actually is.
And I think, Sally, you pointed out something so powerful there. If they're just focusing on calories, the
highly grainy toast, and the peanut paste, blow the calories out. But it doesn't actually matter, because I'm not starving in an hour looking for a sweet biscuit. It's going to last me several hours. So
and some people are better with a little bit more protein than that. So they might do a wholemeal piece of toast with some avocado for the healthy fat, and a poached egg, and some tomato for fiber. So it's about finding, and different combinations work for different people. So what keeps you satisfied the longest, but also with food that you enjoy. You know, it always comes back to that. If you're eating something because you think you should, because you've been told it's healthy, or that's what weight loss surgery patients should be eating, and you don't look forward to it, you're going to fall in a heap. So it comes back to respecting your likes and preferences too.